Welcome to another year of NGINX Sprint. My name is Rob Whiteley. I'm the General Manager of the NGINX business here at F5, and I'm excited to spend a few minutes talking about some of the things we've accomplished over the last year, some of the things that we're promising to accomplish in the coming year, and more importantly, begin to take a little bit of a look at how we want to participate as we roll into our second decade of an open source project. Well, this will be our 18th year, but we're looking at 20, and it's an exciting time here at NGINX. And I want to start with a little bit of perspective. Look, I think all of us know open source has changed the world. It changes the way we interact. It changes the way we do work. And I would argue it even changes the way we live. And there are a huge amount of projects that you see here and many, many more that I couldn't possibly name that have done a phenomenal job creating so much value for us as an industry and for people every day. It's really an exciting time to be in software and to specifically be in open source software. And in fact, to think about just how exciting it is, we know that there's more than 73 million developers that are on GitHub, and they are generating more than 170 million pull requests that have been merged. There's just a phenomenal amount of activity that is really shaping the way we do things moving forward. It's exciting. And in fact, I'd like to think in a not so humble way that we've had a large role to play in that. In fact, we've helped change the web as one of those core open source projects. And there's all sorts of interesting sites that you see here that have used NGINX to create compelling services that we come to rely on every day. In fact, I'm a little ashamed to admit it, between the amount of time I spend on Zoom during my workday, and the amount of time I spend on Netflix in the evening, I'm probably spending about 80% of my waking hours using NGINX, whether I like it or not. It's a huge part of our lives, and it's been very transformative. And we thank you for doing that. It's your embracing of the project and embedding it in your applications that has allowed us to become as prominent as we are. In fact, we achieved a huge milestone this last year. We became the #1 web server by market share. More than half, in fact, 55.4% of sites are either powered by NGINX or NGINX-based technologies. So we have become a very prominent and ubiquitous part of the landscape. So thank you. It's humbling and an honor to be part of this project. But I will say that it's not a static environment. Things are evolving rapidly, and NGINX is in that same world. In fact, if I think about just how much energy is going inside of our industry around business models, how do I license my project? How do I govern my project? How do I take contributions to my project? It's an exciting, dynamic time, and we're seeing that a lot of different models are emerging, and we want to make sure that we're staying abreast of that and doing it in a way that's friendly to our community and authentic to the way we've been building software. And I think about the customer side, we know that customers rely on open source. In fact, 90% of enterprises run open source in production, and a lot of that is to build their internal cloud infrastructure. But all of that has a huge security footprint and exposure area. We're seeing CVEs pop up all the time, and now it's popping up in mission critical open source software. So not only do we think about the model, but we have to think about our tendency and to do security and take that seriously as a core part. And then finally, there's the technology itself. We have definitely been a core part of where the web is going, but as the web transforms, new protocols, new models, new applications, we have to make sure that we're staying abreast of that and keeping up with freshness in the new features and functions we have. So a lot of change, a lot of evolution, and a lot of it in terms of what we need to do as a project and as an industry. And so I think about that, I want you to take away that NGINX is evolving too. In fact, you might think, NGINX, love them, use that project all the time, but it's a little long in the tooth. And you know what? I wouldn't fault you if you held that opinion, but I would challenge you. I would challenge you to revisit NGINX and look at some of the things we've been up to. Of course, you know us for the core project. It's a web server, it's a reverse proxy, it's a cache server. And we continue to do a lot of innovation. We've done our latest mainline and stable releases. We continue to have a regular cadence of new features. And I'm excited looking forward to HTTP3 and Quick, where we do have some implementations, but folding those into mainline and stable so that we continue to push forward with that ever evolving web landscape. But if that's all you know us for, you don't know the whole story. In fact, I think of NGINX as more of an umbrella, and there's a bunch of projects that sit under that umbrella. A good example is NGINX JavaScript, or NJS. NJS is a way to extend the value of NGINX. You can script and do all sorts of powerful things. And I'm never ceasing to see all of the amazing things our community does with NJS, whether it's a complex cache purging capability or complex header manipulations, or really interesting things that you can do with protocols like MQTT v5. The power of NGINX grows with NJS, and it's an exciting project that if you're not familiar with, you should definitely check it out. And speaking of new projects, one that I love is Unit. Unit was written by Igor Sosoyev, the same person who wrote the core NGINX project, and it continues to be maintained and extended by the team today. And you can think of it as a web app server. So it has all the modern languages you'd expect to build your next generation web application. It has built-in proxying capabilities like you've come to know and love from NGINX. But it's really our ability to think of a different way to architect applications. And it's not part of the NGINX core project. It is its own project. All three of these are available on the NGINX GitHub repo. And if you think NGINX, I want you to think about the full breadth of capabilities that we have out there, but there is so much more. In fact, one of the things I talked about last year was our Modern Apps Reference Architecture, or MARA. MARA is really an ecosystem approach to take a fully curated set of technologies and create a living, breathing reference architecture. Think of it as infrastructure as code. Now, within a few clicks, you can deploy an entire working application running on Kubernetes, pre-wired with all the right application networking, logging, tracing, CI/CD capabilities. So for those of you who said Kubernetes is hard to approach, I encourage you to check out MARA. It is one of those NGINX projects. You can see there, if you go to nginx.com/Mara, it will redirect you to the GitHub repo. And I would love your participation. Contribute a module, swap out your one CI/CD component for another, swap out one logging vendor for another. We've already had great participation from partners like Splunk and Pulumi, and we hope to have many, many more as we make this an industry-wide challenge to up our Kubernetes game. So that's a bunch of cool things we've been up to. What I want to do now is talk about what we're going to do. And I use the word promise very specifically, because what I want to do is come back to you a year from now and show you that we accomplished all of these things at scale. And I think of them as falling into three buckets. We're going to do things to modernize, we're going to do things to optimize, and we're going to do things to extend. So let's talk about each of these in turn. When I think about modernize, I'm thinking about how we need to modernize our practices. And I think about that in three different dimensions that you see here. First is our presence on GitHub. We really need to move our projects to GitHub, embrace the full power of the GitHub platform. Now, historically, you've known that the core project sits on Mercurial, and it probably will for some time. But for new projects moving forward, we want to make sure that it's born, so to speak, on GitHub, taking full advantage of issues and all the capabilities so that we are being as easy to approach and easier to contribute to than ever before. So as I start talking about all of these new projects coming out, think of them as community first, think of them as GitHub first. You're going to see that as we modernize. And in fact, part of this is also revamping our entire governance model, making sure we're much easier to contribute. We're being much clearer on how to contribute and what contributions we want and how we will take them. And I think you'll see we're going to be a much different stance on this than maybe you've seen in the past years. And that's exciting for us as a thinking of a more modern open source project. And in fact, brings me to my third point. We have an official Slack channel. We know that in the past, you've had to go to Stack Overflow or Reddit or who knows where to get your NGINX questions answered. Well, now we have an official Slack channel. It's going to be staffed by folks like Hannah Willett, Dave McAllister, and a whole bunch of NGINX experts, on call and available to answer your questions, and more importantly, to facilitate dialogue among the community so you can answer each other's questions. I'll provide a link to it towards the end of the presentation, but it's an exciting opportunity for you to be more involved and more engaged with NGINX projects. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some things we're doing to optimize. And I want to focus on a portion of optimize. We really are looking at how do we make NGINX easier to use as part of the developer experience. One of the things we hear from our community members all the time is, yeah, NGINX, I love it, it's so easy to use. But let's be honest, time to value, or how quickly you get up that learning curve, can take a little bit of time. Once you're there, very easy, very extensible. What we want to do is focus on techniques, tactics, tools, everything we can to compress how long it takes for you to start getting value out of your NGINX, to get to that hello NGINX and start building your application. And so we're looking at all sorts of things that compress that time frame. A good example is that second point. We want to enhance NGINX with a native SaaS experience that allows you to extract much more value out of NGINX. And I'll be announcing a very specific product that we're going to be giving you soon to do just that. And then finally, I want to be clear. We know that there's pain because there's valuable features in our commercial version, NGINX Plus, that you as a developer would love in the open source. And so my promise to you is we will start migrating those features. It was always our intention, and the time is right. So things like DNS service discovery that you need as a developer to build a modern application should not be behind that paywall. So we're going to start looking at those features and migrating them over. And that's where we could use your help. What are the features you need most? What are the things that you wish you had that maybe aren't in the open source version? And we will promise to start migrating those into the project over time. So that's what we want to do from a developer experience. The last thing I want to talk about is how we're going to extend the power of NGINX. And I've talked about this concept of umbrella, releasing new projects, and I think you'll see a rapid cadence moving out soon as we get more and more projects. In fact, I'm about to announce 2 in a minute. But what's guiding that is this concept of we want a full stack of NGINX tools that you can use to deliver applications. And so you probably know us as sitting at the data plane, something that allows you to reverse proxy or do static content serving or caching. And that's great. We'll continue to make sure we're innovative and relevant there. But we know that you then have to put a lot of scaffolding around that open source instance. You have to wire it up with different automation and CI/CD capabilities. You have to do different things to make sure that you're extracting metrics and that you can manage different complex workflows and functions. So what we're looking is at how at each layer do we provide open source tooling so that for a particular use case, you can build a production grade application without having to trip over a paywall. So if you want to use us as an API gateway, you would have all the capabilities from the gateway to how you manage the gateway at scale to how you start doing API workflows in open source. And that's going to be a key part of what you can expect. And last but not least, we really want to continue to extend the MARA infrastructure, that modern apps reference architecture. We want even more partners engaged. We want you to be more engaged. And I think what you'll see as we get into successive releases, we're really going to be much more innovative in some of the componentry that we're doing. It's a living, breathing project. And I think you'll see that it's a great example of how we can extend NGINX because we're essentially helping pre-wire and network Kubernetes more so than it ever has been out of the box. Okay, so those are a series of promises I want to make, but let me punctuate it with 3 very specific announcements that I'm excited to make here at this very event. And I'm going to do it for each one of these promises to show you that not only are these things that are guiding our efforts moving forward, but they're actually things that we're making good on today. So from a modernization perspective, I'm super excited to announce the Kubernetes Gateway API. This is a public beta available on GitHub in the NGINX Inc. repository. It is our official reference implementation of the Kubernetes Gateway API spec. And it's really a key moment in time for us where we want to make sure that we correct something that we know did not go well in the past, which is there are 2 open source ingress controllers, the community maintained version and the NGINX maintained version. So we've made sure that we are involved with the networking SIG early to make sure that we are doing a reference implementation that can be adopted by the community and we don't cause that fracture. And we're excited to have you get involved. You'll see that there's already been some active participation, and we're extremely excited now that it's in public beta to really start ramping that up. Next announcement, NGINX Amplify. You may already know Amplify. You may already be using Amplify. It is our free monitoring service that allows you to monitor your NGINX open source instance. What I'd like to announce is that we will be completely revamping and essentially relaunching Amplify as a much more valuable and comprehensive SaaS product that builds on the NGINX open source experience. Still free, and you're going to see Mona give an example of exactly where Amplify is going. And then last but not least, the last announcement I want to do is NGINX Agent. And this is another thing that Nina will be giving a demo of. So I don't want to talk about it in too much depth, but I'm a little too excited. I got to say something. It is, in my opinion, the dynamic configuration API NGINX open source never had. It's a companion component that you can deploy alongside your NGINX open source to give you truly dynamic configuration capability and be API driven. It really brings NGINX open source into a modern application framework and deployment pattern. And I think you'll find that this is going to be a critical must-have component that you will deploy alongside all your favorite NGINX open source instances. So all exciting announcements, all that are going to be demoed or even provide labs, all here at this event. So I'd like to wrap up my time with you by saying this. Join us, give us your input. Hopefully by now you've seen we're taking the next decade of innovation very seriously. We're committing to a lot of elements of not only the software, but the entire experience around the software. But we need to hear from you. Take our annual survey. Go to nginx.com/survey and we'll redirect you. This is your moment in time. Tell us what you need, what features, what projects, what components of the ecosystem will help us help you. There's also getting hands-on. If you go to nginx.com/labs, it'll redirect you to the portion of this event in the agenda so you can see exactly what software you can get your hands on, get demos of, so that you can get to know all of these new projects. And then finally, I mentioned the Slack. Join us ongoing. If you go to nginx.com/Slack, it'll take you to the join page. I hope to see you online. I hope to engage with you each and every day. And more importantly, I hope you have a great event. Thank you. And again, welcome to Sprint.